In recent years, console gaming has been steadily on the decline, since for a majority of consumers and publishers, the preferred platform to play and host their games is now the PC, thanks largely in part to the rise of digital distribution and the relative ease and low cost of keeping up with rapidly advancing computer hardware tech. PC gaming is on top of the world now, but obviously this wasn't always the case, and when I hear the term PC gaming, I tend to think back to a simpler time from my youth. The old DOS and Windows 95 days, when more people spent time with their games in front of a bulky tube TV rather than a computer monitor. A bulky tube monitor. Like most other kids in that era, I was primarily a console gamer, but I have so many fond memories of playing games such as Doom, Day of the Tentacle, and Lords of the Realm 2 on my old Windows 95 Dell desktop. Playing on a computer over a console at the time had many benefits, such as providing an easy way of connecting with other players over the World Wide Web, and oftentimes a smoother, more eye-pleasing gameplay experience. But for me, one of the big things I loved about PC games in the 90s is something that I admit is pretty shallow. The big cardboard boxes they would typically be packed in. Those big boxes were just so neat to hold onto and look at, and it was a joy to visit the local Computer City or CompUSA to stroll through aisle after aisle of the latest PC offerings. And it was an even bigger joy to bring one of those games home to play, and of course, display on your bookshelf to add to your collection of big box PC games. While there was often more air than software housed within these hefty containers, many times the publisher had no other choice but to opt for a big box to ship their product in, since cool bonus items like fold-out maps and figurines would be included in addition to the game. The days of big box PC games being sold at retailers have pretty much all but passed in the West. But even in 2017, the practice still carries on for many releases in Japan, where the big box PC game tradition is firmly established. Even as far back as the MSX computer era, PC software was usually bundled in oversized packages, whether the ROMs were stored in cartridges, floppy disks and diskettes, or optical media. Not surprisingly, popular arcade and console titles frequently got the PC port treatment, and oftentimes they came in their own fancy big boxes, such as one of my absolute favorite games, that being Konami's Gensou Suikoden, of course. In the previous episode of Import Gaming for the Win, I talked about the Sega Saturn version of the PlayStation role-playing classic, part 1 of a 3-video series covering the game's ports. In this follow-up to the last video, I'll be taking a look at what is the least well-known of the ports, the Windows 95 CD-ROM version of the original Suikoden. Much like the video I did on the Saturn game, this won't be a review or retrospective of the game on the whole, and will instead focus on the unique aspects, good and bad, of this edition with a lot of spoilers, so if you're unfamiliar with Suikoden, this probably isn't the video for you. I'd also suggest watching my Saturn episode before this one too if you haven't already. But whatever the case, from here on out maybe you'll learn something new and enjoy this look into what is one of the rarest entries in the Suikoden series. This port was handled by Konami's KCG Aoyama and Media Entertainment divisions, and was published on March 26, 1998, a half a year before the Sega Saturn release, and because of that, the original PlayStation version was used as the base for this port. As mentioned earlier, it came packaged in a classic PC big box, and something special with this release is its unique cover featuring some fantastic artwork that most fans of the game probably haven't seen. And as to be expected, a large, gorgeous player's manual was also included here. While the core gameplay and story content in this version remains mostly identical to its source, some major changes were made related to graphics, control, and overall presentation to better fit its new platform. This game was designed for Windows 95, but I was able to install and run it on a Windows XP laptop, and it worked just fine, though I did run into a few technical problems that may or may not have been due to incompatibility issues. The minimum required specs to play Suikoden on the PC is a 90MHz CPU, 16MB of memory, 30MB of hard disk space, 2MB of video RAM, a 640 by 480 pixel and 65,000 color display, a 4-speed CD-ROM reader, and direct draw and direct sound capable video and sound cards. But of course, the better your specs, the better the game will function. After installation, you'll be greeted by the title screen, which plays a compressed version of the PS1 game's intro on a continuous loop. You have the option to either continue from a previous save or start up a new game, where you can begin your journey anew and select a name for the main protagonist just like in the original, only this time you get to type with a keyboard. Much like the Saturn port, the loading splash screens are gone here, and from the get-go you're thrown straight into the consultation with Emperor Barbarossa at Gregminster Palace. The first thing you'll notice about the PC edition of Gensou Suikoden is how graphics and information are presented. It's very much done in the style of a typical computer application. The main game is displayed in a small window in the top left corner of the screen, with the name of the current area shown on the title bar up top. This screen provides a clean view of the characters and places in the game all throughout, since dialogue text boxes will appear below it in a separate window. Unfortunately, the game screen's window is locked at a fixed low resolution and cannot be enlarged. Going full screen will only increase the overall area of the main window, with unused portions occupied by a tiled background of the start screen. The menu system from the PlayStation game has been replaced by a tabbed character information window on the right hand side that is always present anytime outside of battles, and save for when characters are speaking, can be accessed in real time with no need to pause the game. The amount of money currently in possession is always visible in a small box located above the character information window, and because of this, I learned for the very first time that Marie actually charges her allies to rest at the inn located in Turan Castle. The scammer. This Suikoden port features no gamepad control, and only supports the keyboard and mouse. For someone who is so used to playing the game on console, this new setup might seem a bit strange or daunting at first, but it doesn't take long to get used to. Particularly when it comes to managing inventory and buying and selling items, using the mouse will make things a breeze, since you can just drag and drop items on the fly and make quick selections with a simple right click and select from a pop-up box. At vendors, you can even sell equipped items as you shop, drastically cutting down on the time it took in the original game to shift items and equipment around. Changing character placement in your party is also handled with drag and drop controls, but unfortunately, the old problem of S-range fighters suddenly being forced into your party and placed in the back row still persists, despite this new setup which would have made fixing it easy. Once you get used to the style, it's hard to go back to the clunky controller-guided menu system on the consoles. Pressing one of the arrow keys will move good old Tyr McDole in the corresponding direction, but the mouse can also be used for movement. A left click on any area of the main game screen will automatically move the player to that location, and it's usually pretty spot on, though there is a decent chance you'll get stuck behind a wall or some object if you try to move too far in one go. You can also right click and hold the button down to have Tyr automatically move in the direction of the mouse cursor relative to its position. To interact with items and people, or to advance dialogue or confirm a selection, you can hit the spacebar or click one of the mouse buttons. It can be really tricky to get the left click to register outside of dialogue, so I'd recommend using the right click instead. But really, it's best to use a combination of the mouse and keyboard when moving around and exploring the lands of the Scarlet Moon Empire. Aside from enemy encounters, which I'll talk about shortly, the graphics remain mostly the same as the PlayStation version, but a bit grainier, and unlike the Saturn port, a majority of the original animations and effects remain intact. The most noticeable omissions are character reflections in Gregminster Palace, transparency effects on the clouds when riding the dragon black, and all instances of the iconic Soul Eater animation used during story segments, which are replaced with the simple graphic used early in the game. So no big deal, really. There are some weird glitches I experienced during my playthrough though, which might have been the result of not running the game on its intended OS. Whenever the screen fades from transitioning from one area to another or there's a flash, the effect will be delayed on a large portion of the right side of the game window, or will just not happen altogether. The fog effects in places like Liu Khan's Hermitage are displayed incorrectly as ugly, blocky artifacts, and Qasim Hazil's Moravia Castle is almost completely unrecognizable and a nightmare to navigate due to its scrambled graphics. Special animations like the warp effect are always doubled, and in some cases take a very long time to complete, so much so that it affects the impact of dramatic scenes. Take Ted's death for example. way to kill an emotional moment. Genso Suikoden on the PC allows the user to tweak many settings in the game not found in the console releases. For starters, you can increase walking speed in towns, dungeons, and the world map, which is very welcome and useful, and pretty much makes use of the Holy Rune obsolete. Selecting this option will cut down on the time it takes to get from here to there significantly, but it can also make certain travels a bit more difficult, such as navigating using the souped up boat with its now supersonic speed. And enabling this feature will also increase the speed of NPCs and most animations, which can lead to complications with certain events playing out so quickly that the game has a hard time managing to keep up. You can turn off background music and sound effects, as well as decrease or increase the text speed, but the default setting is just about perfect as is, so it's not really worth messing with. Aside from these, all other options in the settings menu have to do with the battle system. By default, enemy encounters in the PC Suikoden look much like their PlayStation counterpart, but with a choppier frame rate. However, you can take advantage of the power of the PC to make battles in this port look and play better than those in any other iteration. Enabling hardware acceleration gives several options to boost the graphical and gameplay performance of the battle system. You can enable lighting effects, glow shading, dithering, anti-aliasing, and sound preloading, as well as choose between 3 color palettes and emulation levels. Additionally, you can increase the window and rendering size of enemy encounters to a maximum of 640 by 480 pixels, which is close to filling up the entire screen when resolution is set to 800 by 600. I used the VGA to HDMI converter upscaled with a FrameMeister to capture my footage, so some of the sharpness of the graphics has been lost in all the conversion, but when viewing the game on a laptop, every battle looks incredible and mostly runs as smooth as silk. But either way, just looking at the footage here should give you a pretty good peek at how much these extra settings improve the visuals. Though I must say I do love the pixelated style of the original game quite a bit. One area where the graphics have been downgraded, however, is with Rune and enemy magic spells. While these effects look very sharp and are much more attractive than those used in the Saturn game, they don't quite have the style and grit of the originals, and I'd attribute this to the lack of textures for most Rune attacks here. Much like the Saturn port, a lot of the transparency effects have been taken out of the PC version, as shadows are now pitch black, and translucent enemies like the ghosts in Necklord's castle are completely solid. There are a few battlefields that have what look like polygon tears, and certain graphics are missing for several enemy attacks, such as the card faces on the magicians in Sonier Prison, but I'm not sure if this is because of programming or OS incompatibility. When selecting actions and targets in battle, a separate window will pop up, and just like with managing inventory, it's easy to make your decisions with a mouse this way. But unfortunately, the window is so huge that it blocks most of the game screen. There's no way to make it smaller either, but thankfully it can be moved around so you can get a look at the battlefield before making any critical decisions. Standard enemy encounters are affected by the newly implemented hardware acceleration tools, but large-scale army battles and duels are presented in the normal game resolution and without any added effects. In my playthrough, the army fight visuals were plagued a bit by a kind of odd, tile-like graphical glitch, but like some of the other hiccups I've already mentioned, it probably has to do with playing a Windows 95 game on Windows XP. The one-on-one duels have been slightly altered in the PC conversion in that things play out a little more slowly and methodically, as each action requires the press of the spacebar or click of the mouse to move on, and the exact amount of damage being given and taken is no longer displayed. Load times are often really great and better than the PS1 game, but there will usually be a bit of an annoying delay whenever the music changes. In fact, when this happens, there seems to be an almost 50-50 chance that during a transition in music, the BGM will start up but then cut out completely a few seconds later, at least in my experience. Moving between game screens or executing a magic spell will sometimes cause the music to skip as well, more often with the latter. This might be due to physical factors though, such as disc imperfections or a less than ideal CD reader, but who knows. Other than those problems, the music is just the way you remember it from the original, but if you do run into one of them, particularly the music cutting out, it can really kill the mood. So up until now, the changes made to the PC version I've mentioned include a keyboard and mouse control style, a much improved inventory management system, some technical issues that may or may not stem from OS incompatibility, and a few minor downgrades or problems that are more than offset by options that enhance the visual and gameplay experience. There are a few other differences in this version I have yet to mention, however, which are minor or just plain odd. As you may have already noticed, the grayscale character selection wheel from the original is now a kind of spinning Star of David. Shalom. Going into the PC standby mode without shutting the application down and trying to resume the game can lead to errors such as character and building sprites disappearing. Using the mouse to toss your dice in Untitled has a pesky delay that will probably lead to frequent bad rolls, but you can avoid this by using the keyboard. In other versions of Suikoden, after delivering the plans for the fire spears to Kage and Saradi, rather than returning to the hero's own bed to retire into the night, you have the option to perv out a bit and sleep in the one next to Odessa if you like, but the PC version has removed this. Don't ask me why I felt the need to bring this up, you probably already know the answer anyway. And speaking of Odessa, instead of setting up the single line Tyr makes about her death at the secret factory as a character choice like all other times he speaks in the game, he just blurts it out like a normal piece of dialogue. I can't be 100% sure of this, but it seems that when enabling faster movement speed, using the keyboard to move will result in a much larger rate of enemy encounters over clicking around with the mouse, most likely related to programming and registering keystroke input. The individual character endings have been altered so that they are simply presented as static images, and a black screen fade is used to transition between them all. They also go by so quickly that the credits roll before the ending song has a chance to complete. The after credits epilogue scene has been slightly tinkered with as well, and as Tyr McDole secretly leaves Gregminster in the cover of night, he looks left and right before heading out on his journey, an animation that is never used at any other part of the game. And finally, the image that the game ends on is the same one used in the Saturn game, meaning that it was used in this version first. Other than that, all of the other extra content that was added to the Saturn port, such as the Gremio afterlife scenes in the battle arena, are not present. Whew, well, that's Genso Suikoden for Windows 95, an interesting port of one of my absolute favorite games. The improved graphics and menu system in this version are fantastic new additions, but some of the technical issues, such as the audio cutting out, spoiled a lot of what makes Suikoden great, which is the story it tells and the atmosphere it creates. Finding a way to play this iteration of the game will be pretty tough for most people, since it's an old piece of software that hasn't yet been released on PC digitally as of 2017, and hard copies are extremely hard to find online or in the wild. And even when you do find it, it comes with a steep price tag, often over $100. It was published officially in Japan by Konami, and there are apparently Chinese and Korean language versions out there as well, though I'm not sure if they were legitimate releases. Bootleg or not though, for a Suikoden fan, any of these PC games would be an excellent collector's item. For anyone else, however, I'd say stick with the PlayStation original. As the game works and flows better, the cost of entry is a lot kinder on the wallet. It's easy enough to get a hold of physically or digitally, and at least in my opinion, despite the intuitive setup of the PC game, it's just so nice having everything displayed at a consistent resolution on one big screen. It's a bit late, but with this video, my part in the summer of Suikoden 2017 has come to an end. But wait, you say, how can the summer of Suikoden be over for me when I promised to make a third video about Suikoden's ports? Does that mean I changed my mind? Or I'm just pulling another Namco's Valkyrie video series and will seemingly forget about it completely? Well, you'll get the video, but not anytime soon. You'll just have to wait a little while. Until then, I hope you all enjoyed the content from the past few months from all the contributors in the summer of Suikoden. I want to say a big thanks to everyone who participated, watched, or spread the word. And also, another big thanks, or mahalo, goes to my friend and fake Hawaiian brada Andrew from Retro Island Gaming for helping me get those splendid shots of his US big box PC collection. You know what they say about a guy with a big box. Wait, what?
Hi, doggy.
Anyway, be sure to check out his JRPG and PC game reviews. Do it now! Well, thanks again for watching this episode of Import Gaming for the Win. This is Jimmy Hoppa. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Let's see. Am I game or not game? Am I game or not game? Am I gay? Oh. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, one of those has to work.